I've got Tracy Ebarb here with me. Tracy, you go to our Frisco club, don't you?
No, South Lake.
Oh, you go to South Lake. Okay. All right. I knew you weren't in Uptown, so I'm in Uptown today. We were joking around earlier. I've got access to everything I need right here, right?
Sheltering in place in style.
That's right. That's right. Not a bad place to shelter over here, and I wish everyone else could be here with us. So Tracy, you go to our South Lake Club, and we're really grateful to have all of our members and people who have been coming into Jen's Place participate on the show, especially ones that even before all of this have dedicated their lives to communities, to nonprofits, to those people that have needs well beyond what we have as Americans. And so I was excited to chat with you because I know you do a lot of work in Africa and supporting communities that, desperately need resources and are experiencing adversity, probably nowhere close to what a lot of Americans have experienced, even through this crisis. So I want to chat with you today just about having seen people in the most adverse situations. What would you say to some of the Americans right now that have lost their jobs, that have lost their businesses potentially, based on your personal experience seeing people go through arguably, much worse?
It's interesting, being our American perspective as consumers has bred in us a lifestyle and expectation that that's what we do best. We consume, whether it's haircuts every 4 weeks or grocery store and having everything we need always at our fingertips. Several years ago, a gentleman in Sierra Leone, a dentist over there, was talking to me because I had some difficulty getting a conversation with an organization over there. And I said, I'm trying to help. Why am I having such a problem? And he told me, he said, Tracy, he said, they're afraid that you're going to take our best people away. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we have these organizations come in and they find our best and brightest and they take them to the United States. And when they get to the United States, they think, well, I'm never leaving here. And so they rob our country of the best and brightest. And I said, well, I can see where that would be an issue, and I'm sorry to hear that. And he said, because what you don't know is we don't need all the stuff that you have. We need a little education, and that's what we hope that you can help us to bring and help us move us along. But we don't want that lifestyle because we know it can all end in a day. And he was referencing the Sierra Leone Civil War, where everything literally kind of went to hell in a handbasket over about a 3-day period, and they went from a fairly prosperous country because of the diamond industry there to being just the poorest of the poor. And it was a great perspective to understand that they didn't need all the stuff to be happy. And I think that during this shutdown, whatever we're going to call it, that we've kind of realized that we don't necessarily need all the stuff that we're so used to. And I think the withdrawal pains from that have really hurt a lot of folks because, I hate to use that new normal terminology, but I think it's a new abnormal, more so. And, I've seen it in friends and family even, of having a hard time adjusting, to the lack of freedoms, yes, but also the lack of stuff and the freedom to do things. And from the perspective of those folks who have had to deal with that all their lives, it's almost like we're getting a little bit of our comeuppance, so to speak.
I agree. And there's this quote that just keeps hitting me in the head every day that is, I think, exactly in alignment with what you just shared. It's something to the effect of your true wealth is what you have when you have no money. When all of your money is gone, that's your true net worth, quote, or your true wealth. And what you just said validates that I think so many people had, their identity was what car they drove or house they had or business they had, is their identity was wrapped up into stuff. and then it was taken from them, and it really shows you what you have left, doesn't it?
It really does. And of course, we also begin to associate value. I mean, who knew that the most valuable thing in our house a month and a half ago would be toilet paper?
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, it does shift the perspectives. It puts things in a lot more realistic perspective at the same time.
Yeah. So, I mean, you deal with communities in Africa and around the globe that are experiencing these really difficult situations. Is there anything in particular, like a process or formula or framework, or just kind of a way of getting out of that you can apply to the situation that we're in right now?
I think that one of the most um, enduring characteristics of folks in developing countries is their resourcefulness. Whereas United States, and it's obvious in a lot of ways, and I'm not trying to be political in any way here, but it's almost as if we didn't see this coming.
Mm.
And I was speaking with one of our partners in the Democratic Republic of the Congo uh, just the other day, and he said, we're preparing for COVID, but Tracy, we also have 2 new cases of Ebola, and we thought we were done with Ebola. And I said, oh, that's, and he said, but he said, we're okay. We're going to deal with this. And the perspective. I mean, when you look at us, I mean, to say that we panicked may be a bit of an overstatement. It may be a bit of an understatement. And to hear him say, because whenever he said that, I thought, oh, gee, what are we going to do? I mean, how can you do that? But it was this, no, it's okay. We've dealt with Ebola. And when these things come in developing countries, it's almost, I don't want to say it in a negative way, but because they don't necessarily expect it, but it doesn't sneak up on them. They've dealt with things like this before, and they tend to handle it well. Some might point out the fact that, Cuba handles hurricanes a lot better sometimes than the United States. So when you're used to making do and making the best of what resources you have, sometimes it makes you a bit more resilient.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. What do you do at Medical Benevolence Foundation, where you work as an organization, just to give our viewers and listeners some more perspective into your daily life?
Happy to do that. My organization is Medical Benevolence Foundation. It's medicalmission.org, www.medicalmission.org. And we resource hospitals and nursing schools and clinics in developing countries with materials, with pharmaceuticals, with training for both physicians and nurses, with technology. We try to resource them, anything that we can give them to help them raise the level of medical care in their countries. My position in all that, I'm the guy that goes around and asks for money. I'm the fundraiser. And so, plus if you act now, I'll send you a prize. No, I'm just kidding. But one of the things, and I, a lot of folks say, well, I don't like asking for money. And I frankly enjoy it, because it's never a personal thing for me, because I know that I can, if you, Ben, decide to give a gift to Medical Benevolence Foundation, I know that gift is going to be multiplied hundreds of times in the work that we do. So it's a real privilege for me to marshal the resources of folks, and which really brings me with this shift conversation that you've been talking about. In times like this, times of the Great Recession, the Great Depression, other times, there's always this attitude that I better hold on to what I have. And the reality is, from a psychological standpoint, there are plenty of studies to bear this out, that giving and generosity in times like that actually is a great stress reliever. It enhances our overall view of not only our own selves, but also the world. And so I would encourage folks going through this, whether you're fortunate enough to have not been affected a great deal, except for maybe your inability to travel around where you want to go, but or if you're one of those who, seeing your paychecks cut in half or go away, find ways to be generous. There's power in that I can't really describe. It's both, I think it's both spiritual and metaphysical, that power of generosity. And certainly, we accept gifts at Medical Benevolence Foundation, but there are tons of causes around the Dallas-Fort Worth area that do incredible work. And so I would encourage all of our gents, comrades, to find charities that inspire you, that excite you, and little amount, small amount, large amount, doesn't matter. The amount is not significant as much as the act of giving.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And that's exactly where I wanted to go, because I know you have some ministry work in your background, and the churches, I think pretty much every church out there kind of teaches that you have this time, talent, and treasure. And we've talked about it on the show that a lot of people's treasure has gone down, but their time has gone up significantly. There's an abundance of time right now. It's amazing to see. We raised $3,000 for hand sanitizer that we donated to all the homeless shelters, and we're just got on WFA News. We'll be airing tonight on that donation. But was the coolest thing was a bottle of hand sanitizer cost $40. We had some people who lost their job and lost everything give us $5 on Venmo, or give us $20 on Venmo and said, "Look, I have nothing, but will $5 help?"
Yeah.
For those people that they just cannot make a treasure donation, do you have any recommendation on what we should be doing to make a time investment? Like, what can we do to serve, in your mind, with our time if the treasure is just not there?
There's right now, because we're so locked down, constricted, however you want to say it, that's a difficult one to do. I mean, folks in my home church, we've got a group of guys and gals that want to go and help folks, but we can't really do that. But I think that for folks that do have time and the skills, when I was a youth minister many years ago, we used to do this sometimes during the summer. We would just load up 4 or 5 lawnmowers in the back of a truck, and we would just drive around town looking for lawns to mow. And the kids would unload, and they, chop hedges and cut grass, and it was almost like trying to sneak in there and get it done and then go away without being noticed. And so there are things like that you can do. Right now it's more difficult because we are so restricted. But call centers are still, from a fundraising standpoint, I have hired 3 people just today just to make phone calls out to my donors, just not to ask for money, but just to call them and say, "Hey, we care about you. We're checking in. Are you okay?" And so I'm sure there are a number of call centers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or not call centers, but charities that are looking for those kind of volunteer workers as well. So you got a favorite charity? Call and say, "Hey, is there something I can do remotely?" And volunteer your time that way. One thing I'd also point out too, Ben, is in that time, talent, treasure, the worst thing you can do is to think that's a multiple choice question. It's not. It's all of the above. Whenever that conversation comes up. So that's the fundraiser part of it.
I love that. I'm going to steal that line from you.
Yeah, feel free.
That's really practical advice, to just call up the church, call up the organization that you feel most passionate about, and they probably need something. I mean, you could be making masks for the people that are out there on the front lines, or making some phone calls, or checking emails, or whatever it is, especially because a lot of these organizations had to lay some people off, and they're probably looking for any volunteers that are willing to help do something. Yeah, I love that. I want to end our conversation, Tracy, around gratitude. We've probably ended a good portion of our shows on this. You seem like a guy that is very grateful, and you generously even gave a gratuity to one of our grooming specialists that is out of work right now, which we appreciate. What are you grateful for now in this moment? And are there new things that have popped up in terms of maybe anything you took for granted before that you've been reminded of in terms of your gratitude towards it?
Well, you didn't prime me on that question. That's one out of the blue there. So, I think that all of us, and of course, this is probably kind of a recurring theme, but all of us probably realize that we are grateful to have our family and those close to us. When I'm not traveling, which obviously I hadn't been for 2 months, I work out of a home office. My wife also works out of a home office. So we're kind of used to that part of being at home together. But to see and talk to other folks who are having to do that for the first time, I think that I've just seen an attitude of, you know what, my work's valuable too, because oftentimes we don't know what the other person does, even though we may be married to them. We don't necessarily understand the pitfalls and the heartaches that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. My wife is a fractional CFO, and she works with companies all over the world, and I get to hear her complaints and her joys. And so I guess I'm grateful that I've had an opportunity a little bit more so to kind of see into her world and appreciate the work that she does for others. That, and just grateful that, that I live in a community where our church is, Trinity Presbyterian in South Lake is my home church, and our church is reaching out to the community and looking for opportunities to serve people who are, haven't been as fortunate through this, maybe as some of us have, and are doing so aggressively. And we're even thinking about other churches, because one of the things that happens more so in church nonprofits, in other words, let me back up on that. In nonprofits, in times like this, donations tend to dip, but usually recover. And history tells us that. After 9/11, the year after 9/11 was the biggest charitable giving year in history. And so we tend to recover, except for the lost income at churches. And because when those tithes go away and those offerings go away, they don't recover like other nonprofits. So I'm grateful that myself and our church are looking and see, okay, are there churches out there that are going to need some financial assistance too? Because these pastors and others are going to get their paychecks cut possibly. How can we help our brothers and sisters out there? So I'm grateful for that we're not just thinking of ourselves, but we're trying to look beyond the knee-jerk reaction of just taking care of number one. So, and I see that a lot.
I'm glad to hear you validate that there's so much unity happening right now, whether you're on different sides of the political aisle or different sides of the faith aisle. There's so many people that seem to be coming together and unifying around, all of us just being in this together. So that's cool to hear that. And it's a good message too, that I wasn't aware of, that the churches are going to need a focused effort and focused giving to get them back on the right track. And that might be a place, now that our audience knows that, to maybe allocate some more of their funds if they feel that in their heart. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, Ben, it's going to be those rural churches and those small churches that, that literally are week to week on their offerings, that are still doing incredible work in their communities, but just won't have the resources to replenish. So if folks are out there and want to look for a worthy cause, that and someone that or an organization that's doing great work, that's not going to have an opportunity. Unlike my organization, I can find new people to give all over the world, but a church generally has a set of members, and if those folks can't help, then they're kind of stuck. So it's tenuous for them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Tracy, we will have you back in South Lake, I promise, at one point. We're subject to all of our government regulations right now, but I know a lot of our viewers and listeners are wondering when we're coming back. So we will be back as soon as the government allows us to. And if your hair's looking pretty good, but if you need a hat, just send me a note. I can get you a hat.
Well, I may need one at some point to cover it up. So
yeah, you don't want to see my hair. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for hopping on with me. We'll see you again soon.
Great, Ben. Good visiting with you. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.